The rain had not yet touched the red clay roads that wound through the backcountry of Georgia, but the air carried the scent of an approaching storm. In the fading light, a lone pickup truck rolled down the road, its headlights slicing through the mist. Behind the wheel was Eli Carter, a 35-year-old historian who had long since stopped believing in legends, until now. On the passenger seat rested a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed, its words written in a hand that trembled with time. The ink spoke of a treasure buried during the final days of the Civil War, somewhere deep in the swamps between Georgia and Alabama. Eli had inherited the journal from his grandfather, a man obsessed with Southern history, who had spent half his life chasing rumors of gold hidden by Confederate soldiers retreating from Union forces. Most dismissed it as folklore, but one name kept surfacing across every document, every story: Captain Silas Beauregard, a Confederate officer who vanished with his men in 1865 and was never seen again. The journal's last entry read only, "The river keeps its secrets. When the cypress leans, the truth will be revealed." Eli parked his truck near an abandoned plantation house that had long surrendered to vines and silence. Its white columns were cracked, and the veranda sagged under years of neglect. The moon rose behind drifting clouds, bathing the ruins in a ghostly silver. Inside, the floors groaned beneath his boots. Dust coated the furniture like snow. He placed the lantern on a table and opened the journal once more. A faint map sketched in pencil showed the course of an old river, one that no longer existed on modern charts. The plantation was marked with an X, but not as the treasure site. It was a starting point. As thunder rumbled in the distance, Eli heard footsteps behind him. He spun around, his flashlight beam slicing through the dark. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a woman in a mud-stained jacket, holding a revolver loosely at her side. "Looking for something, Professor?" she said. Eli recognized her instantly. Charlotte Hayes, a treasure hunter with a reputation for finding what others could not. She had been following the same clues for years. "I might ask you the same," Eli replied, keeping his voice calm. "Your grandfather wasn't the only one with that journal," she said, lowering the gun but not holstering it. "There were copies. Some men would kill for what's in there." "I'm not after gold," Eli said. "I'm after the truth." She smiled thinly. Truth and treasure are usually buried in the same hole. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating her face, sharp, determined, yet haunted. They stood in silence until the rain began, heavy and relentless. It drummed against the roof, drowning out the night. The next morning, they set out together in Eli's truck, following the journal's coordinates. The land grew wilder the deeper they drove. Fields gave way to forest, then to marshland, where Spanish moss hung like tattered curtains. They crossed a rickety bridge and arrived at a riverbank choked with reeds. The water was still, brown and opaque. Charlotte studied the map while Eli compared it with satellite images on his phone. "According to this," she said, tracing a line with her finger, "the river changed course after a flood in 1908. The old bend where they hid the treasure could be under that swamp now." Eli nodded. "And if Beauregard really buried it, he'd have marked the site somehow. The cypress tree, when the cypress leans, remember?" Charlotte looked up. Across the swamp stood a massive cypress leaning over the water like a sentinel. They loaded their gear, shovels, ropes, waterproof lamps, and waded into the mud. The swamp swallowed their steps. The air buzzed with mosquitoes, and the smell of decay clung to everything. Charlotte led the way, her eyes scanning for movement. Alligators slid silently through the murk nearby. They reached the base of the leaning cypress. Its roots rose from the ground like twisted claws. Eli brushed away the moss from the trunk and found faint carvings, letters, nearly erased by time. He traced them with his fingers. "S.B.," he whispered. "Silas Beauregard." Charlotte knelt beside him, excitement flickering in her eyes. "Then we're close." They began to dig. The mud was heavy, the work slow. Hours passed, and the sun began to sink behind the trees. Eli was about to give up when his shovel struck something solid. A dull metallic sound echoed through the swamp. He and Charlotte exchanged a look, then cleared the mud until a rusted iron chest emerged from the earth. They pried it open, expecting gold, jewels, or coins, but inside were only bundles of cloth, soaked and brittle. Eli lifted one carefully, and when the fabric fell apart, he saw parchment sealed with wax. Dozens of them. Letters, documents, Confederate seals still intact. Charlotte frowned. No treasure? Eli's hands trembled as he opened one of the letters. This is worth more than gold. These are Confederate payroll ledgers, war orders, personal letters, proof of what they hid, what they stole. Among the papers was a small journal bound in leather, newer than the rest. He opened it and read aloud a passage written by Captain Beauregard himself. We buried not gold, but guilt. The fortune stolen from the freedmen, the silver melted from church crosses, the coins taken from the dying. Let none find it, lest the sins of the South rise again. Charlotte stood silent. The swamp seemed to hold its breath. So it wasn't treasure, she said quietly. It was evidence. Eli nodded. The legend was never about riches. It was about redemption, or the attempt at it. Before they could take another step, a gunshot cracked through the trees. The sound echoed across the swamp. A bullet tore through the cypress trunk inches above Eli's head. They dropped behind the chest. Charlotte drew her revolver. From the shadows, 3 men emerged, armed, their faces masked with bandanas. One of them carried an old metal detector strapped to his back. "Step away from the box," the leader shouted. "That belongs to us." Charlotte whispered, "Grave robbers. I've seen them before, mercenaries who chase rumors and sell whatever they find." Eli's heart pounded. "They think it's treasure." She nodded. "Then let's not correct them." The rain began again, soft at first, then torrential. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Charlotte fired a warning shot that sent the men ducking for cover. Mud splashed, branches snapped. Eli grabbed the chest, straining to drag it toward higher ground. A bullet grazed his arm. Charlotte returned fire, forcing the attackers back. Through the chaos, one of the men flanked them from behind, swinging the butt of his rifle. Charlotte turned too late. The blow knocked her to her knees. Eli lunged, tackling the man into the mud. They struggled, fists and water flying. The man reached for his weapon, but Eli slammed his head against a root, dazing him. The leader advanced through the rain, gun raised. Eli froze, but before the man could shoot, Charlotte fired once. The shot hit his shoulder, spinning him around. He dropped the gun and stumbled backward into the swamp. The last of the mercenaries fled into the trees. When the storm finally passed, silence returned, broken only by frogs and distant thunder. They stood together, soaked and trembling. Eli looked down at the chest. "We can't leave this here." Charlotte nodded. "But we can't take it all either. It'll rot in evidence lockers or vanish into some collector's vault." Eli wiped the blood from his arm. "Then we do what Beauregard couldn't. We tell the truth." They carried the papers back to the truck in silence, the swamp swallowing their footprints behind them. Days later, in a small town near Montgomery, they met with a historian from the state university. Eli laid out the documents on the table, each piece a window into the darkest corners of the South's past. Slave transactions, looted artifacts, confessions from soldiers who had stolen from the very people they claimed to defend. The historian stared at the pile, speechless. "This will rewrite history," he whispered. "It should," Eli said. "But make sure it tells the whole story, the guilt, the greed, and the cost." Charlotte leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What happens now?" Eli looked out the window, where the morning sun burned through the mist. "Now the past gets to speak." Weeks passed. News of the discovery spread across the South. Historians debated the authenticity of the letters. Politicians argued about what they meant. Some praised Eli for uncovering truth, others accused him of tarnishing Southern heritage. Through it all, Eli kept quiet. He had no interest in fame. He had seen what obsession did to men, his grandfather, Beauregard, even himself. One evening, he returned alone to the old plantation. The house was quieter than before, as if relieved of a burden. He walked through the halls and stopped at the fireplace, where he found a faded photograph tucked into the mantel. It showed Captain Beauregard with his men, faces proud, weary, human. Eli placed the photograph back and whispered, "You found your redemption, Captain." Outside, the cicadas sang. The storm had washed the air clean. As he drove away, the headlights swept across the cypress trees, swaying in the distance. Somewhere out there, the swamp still held the scars of a nation's greed, and the memory of two strangers who dared to unearth its truth. Months later, a museum exhibition opened in Atlanta titled "The Lost Treasure of the American South." Visitors came from across the country to see the letters, the journals, and the chest itself, now cleaned and preserved behind glass. A plaque beneath it read, "Discovered by Dr. Eli Carter and Charlotte Hayes, 2024. Contents: letters, documents, and ledgers revealing the hidden losses of the Civil War. The true treasure, truth reclaimed." Eli stood among the crowd, unnoticed. Charlotte appeared beside him, dressed simply, her eyes scanning the exhibit. "You did it," she said. "We did," he replied. She smiled faintly. "Still no gold, though." Eli chuckled. "Maybe that's for the best. Gold corrupts. Truth heals." They watched as a group of schoolchildren pressed their faces to the glass, eyes wide with wonder. One little boy pointed at Beauregard's journal and whispered, "They found the treasure." Charlotte looked at Eli. "Maybe he's right." Eli nodded. In a way, we all did. As they left the museum, dusk settled over Atlanta. The city lights glimmered like stars fallen to earth. For the first time in years, Eli felt something like peace. He had gone looking for a legend and found the weight of history instead. A truth buried not in gold, but in the hearts of those who lived and died by it. That night, back in his study, he opened his grandfather's old journal. Between its pages, he placed a photograph of himself and Charlotte, standing beside the museum display. He wrote a final line beneath it. "The South's treasure was never lost. It was hidden in the stories we were too afraid to tell." He closed the book, set it on the shelf, and turned off the light. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, carrying whispers of the past. And deep in the swamp, beneath the leaning cypress, the earth rested again, its secret finally told, its burden finally lifted.